Hi folks, and a warm welcome to our HMO Mini Series, Episode 1, Space, Light and Rights. Now it's important to remember this is a quick 5-minute snapshot into the space, light and rights required when developing or reconfiguring a HMO. We will go into more details. This is one of our weekly webinars, which you can either watch live it's a free to attend, or you can catch up on our YouTube channel. It's a bit of a longer space. We give examples of actual properties that we've used and so on and so forth. So without further ado, space. The first thing when you're considering space is bedroom sizes. So a single occupancy room, it's important to remember its occupancy is 6.51 square meters, and a double occupancy room is 10.22 square meters. So if you're going to build either of those things to sleep your clients, to house your clients overnight, then it's important to make sure that the rooms you are going to be using for HMOs meet those standards. Otherwise, it will not meet the license criteria for your local authority. It's also important to recognise that each local authority may have a different standard to the national space standards, which is what I've just given you. So it's really important to check out the HMO standards on the council website that will be licensing your property. The second thing to think about is ceiling height, especially those lofts and so on that you might be wanting to convert into the extra space for extra revenue. So ceiling height starts at 1.9 meters. Some local authorities require up to 2.3 meters before they will class a ceiling height as livable for a HMO room. And it's really important to recognise that eaves heights, the eaves being the bits that come down from a roof, has to be a minimum, normally, depending on council, but a minimum on national standards of 1.5 square meters. So if your central point of your HMO loft conversion room meets 1.9 square meters, and that's the standard for the council, but your eaves height dropped to 1.5 meters, then you can only count the floor space in and around that 1.5 square meters. So if your floor space is 15 meters, but you only have 9 square meters of, within the 1.5 square meter boundary, that means you're going to have to class that as a single occupancy room. And that's how the boundaries stretch. When you get to 6.51 meters, it's single occupancy. Up to 10.22 square meters is single occupancy. When you're over 10.22 square meters, it's double occupancy. You can't go somewhere in between, unfortunately. Then we've got to talk a little bit about kitchens. Generally, councils say kitchens need to start at circa 11 square meters. You can get smaller, it depends on the council's definition in their HMO standards. But what I would say is if you're going for larger HMOs, circa 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rooms, and you need to be careful that the standard size for kitchen doesn't change. And you also need to be careful if you're providing single occupancy rooms that there isn't a requirement for an additional communal living space or an additional floor space within your kitchen community environment, because the space of the rooms can sometimes dictate the space available in the communal areas. So if you've got 5 rooms at 10.22 and 1 room at 6.51 or above, between up to 10.22, you may need to offer 3-4 square extra meters in your kitchen space. Please make sure you check with the council. Okay. Second thing is and corridors. Before we move on, corridors and stairs 2 meters head clearance in general. But again, check with your council. It should be on the website somewhere. Okay. Light. Any livable space, and that's communal living space or bedroom, requires adequate natural light, which means if you've got a room space in the back corner, it's got 2 walls with other houses, unfortunately you're not going to be able to use, and you can't get a window in there, you cannot use that as a livable space. Corridors and en-suites do not require an adequate natural light, and a note on en-suites, they do not count towards your space standards when it comes to living space. So if you put an ensuite in, you need 10.22 meters for a double plus ensuite of around 2.5 to 3.5 meters normally. Then we move on to rights. So there's 2 different definitions on rights. One is a planning requirement and one is a license requirement. Planning, if you're turning a house, which is a class C3 dwelling, into a HMO, which is a class C4 dwelling, you have a permitted development under planning up to 6 occupants. Okay, not rooms, occupants. If you're planning on housing couples, then it's 6 occupants. Usually people put 6 rooms in for single occupancy, even at double standards, so you can actually class it and advertise it as a double room, and that sometimes saves on communal space as well. So Important we go through this in more detail, maybe in one of our webinars, or you can work with us to help build your portfolio. In terms of if you're going using a commercial space, typically Class E, you will need to go to either convert to from E to Class 3, C3, and then Class C3 to C4, which you can do technically under permitted development. But our word of warning here is most permitted developments from E to C3 will have a restriction to say it can only be used for that C3 class, and therefore you may need to apply for planning anyway to get to that C4 planning application successfully completed. So sometimes it's better just to go straight in with that. Word of warning, anything above 6 beds is a class called sui generis, meaning a class on its own. 6 occupants is a class on its own. Sui generis means class on its own, and that comes with a full planning application, and as many beds as you want above that is exactly the same. So you will need to put a full planning application in. A second word of warning, some councils, some of the busier councils, certainly Greater Manchester Council where I live, have put an Article 4 restriction on permitted developments from C3 class to C4 class. What that means is it's no longer permitted. I have to apply for planning if I want to build a C4 HMO from a C3 class building, or a HMO in general from an E class building. Therefore, you need to understand whether this restriction is in place, and probably speak with a local planning consultant to see what the restriction actually contains. If it's a number of HMOs, if it's a complete blanket. Some areas have complete blanket, no HMO rules. So it's really important. And where is the boundary? Because sometimes the best HMOs are right on the boundary, just outside. So it's really important to understand that, and we'll go through that in much more detail in one of our webinars. Licensing. So licensing is different to planning. You may get planning approved for a HMO room that doesn't meet licensing standards. So it's important when you're dealing with architects or somebody to help build, do your design package, that they understand both the planning and the licensing conditions. Now, licensing can be kitchen size, it can be bedroom size, it can be fire alarm panels, it can be ensuite standards, it can be any of those things that you need to be aware of, as well as meeting standard building regulations. So it's really important to meet the license standards of the local council, especially when it comes to things like kitchen sizes. If you're building any single rooms, double rooms, or you're having a mishmatch of the two. So please make sure you understand the license conditions before you embark on a HMO conversion. And that's it. That's it for me. Whirlwind stop tour. I appreciate it. 6-7 minutes there, and we'll talk about more in detail on space, lights and rights in one of our weekly webinars. You take care, and I'll catch you on the next one, where we talk about location. All the best. Bye for now.